Welcome to Chalk Dust, the podcast that gives you a front row seat to some of the best classrooms in the world. I'm Rebecca Birch.
And I'm Nathaniel Swain. I'm a teacher and instructional coach and have the great pleasure of working with schools and teachers from around the country and the world on their instructional practice and school improvement.
And I'm currently academic in residence at a girls' school in Sydney. I'm an English teacher and I'm also completing PhD research on how explicit instruction supports student wellbeing. We're adding our voice to the growing field of evidence-informed education podcasts, but with a distinctive focus.
Each episode features expert commentary on real classroom footage and allows you to develop your eye as an expert observer or a classroom expert of your very own. You can listen wherever you get your podcasts, but also watch along on YouTube or Substack to get all of the visual detail.
You might choose to share an episode with your department or use it to spark discussion in professional learning sessions. If you or your school find the podcast valuable, a simple like or follow on our platforms is a wonderful way to show support and help Chalk Dust reach more teachers. Before
we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands in which we're recording today, as well as the lands that you may be listening from. Here in Gippsland, I acknowledge the Gunai-Kurnai people and pay my respects to elders past and present.
And I pay my respect to the Gadigal people on whose lands I'm recording today. So today we have two very special guests with us. First, we have Katie, who's currently the General Manager of Teachwell. Katie comes to her role with extensive experience working with school leaders in one of the country's leading school improvement programs, and she's deeply committed to ensuring that educational research informs best practice in schools throughout Australia.
And we also have Caitlin Rowan, who is a primary classroom teacher preparing to take on a team leader role at Beanyup Primary School in WA. Caitlin completed Teachwell's 5-day course in September this year. Welcome to both you, Katie and Caitlin.
Thank you for having us. We're so excited to be here with you both.
Yeah, thank you.
So we've got a special opportunity here to see a pre and a post, if you like, of your classroom practice, Caitlin. And I want to thank you for being willing to share it on the podcast. Could you tell us a bit about the context of what we're about to watch?
So to start the Teachwell process, the masterclass series, we went for our first professional development day. We got an introduction into what it would be like. And then we went away. And in that first break, we had to film us teaching. And that was something that we then self-reflected on as teachers, but we also got some feedback back from the Teachwell Masters class coaches. And from there, we were able to reflect on that a little bit before heading into the second class. And then we did that again. They call that coaching cycle. So I think the one that we're about to watch was my first one. So I'd only been to one master class before doing this. Don't judge too harshly.
Well, thank you for sharing it. And so, Katie, what are the kinds of things that we're looking for in terms of the practices that Caitlin has been working on? And then this is her sort of first recording, if you like.
Yeah, I think, Nathaniel, the things we're looking for generally for the first time a teacher is filming themselves in their classroom is we're really just looking at participation. So what we're interested in as the coaches is there frequent and relevant responses from the students, and how is the teacher going about getting those kinds of responses? This will be things that your audience knows very well, but things like choral response, using pair shares, whiteboards, anything that's getting the kids to actually actively engage in the learning rather than sitting back and passively being disengaged or thinking about what they're having for lunch. So that's really what we're looking for in this first type of video that a teacher would be self-reflecting on and then uploading to our Teachwell learning management system.
All right.
I liked what you had to say there about relevant too. I think we'll see a lot of that in the second video. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this one.
Excellent. Let's get started.
Define area. What do I use as my formula? Stand up. What is the formula for area, everybody? Awesome. So in this case, what is my formula going to be? 5 times 6, 6 times 5. Either way.
So Caitlin or Katie, what are some of the things you're noticing there in that first bit?
Obviously, you can see that I called a non-volunteer. I didn't use anything physical. It was just someone random off the top of my head, which is something that I've improved on. And then in that second little part there, it was getting everyone to do a choral response. Yeah, and I think if I could just add to that, one of the things I noticed was just probably a lower participation rate. So I could hear a couple of kids getting in there, and then a few other kids probably just like, I'll let my friend next to me answer that one. So definitely that sense of cues and routines. And that's what I'd be noticing straight away watching that clip.
And I know that within the range of practices we could work on as teachers, there's like an infinite number of things you could potentially work on. So in your role as coach at Teachwell, why do you start with participation? Like, what's the rationale there?
I think there's a couple of reasons we start with participation. One of the main reasons is that generally speaking, that's a good place for most teachers because they're already doing something. So there's already some participation tactic that they are already using. And this is about, can we get more participation in? And also maybe just some tweaks or adjustments that you could make to the tactics you're already using. And so we find it's a really good starting point for any teacher because everyone's at a different starting place, but it really is about any amount more. So is there something that you can adjust or change or add to your practice that will drive a high participation rate? And the second reason we start with participation is actually when we get kids to participate in reviews, in lessons, that accumulation over time has a real large impact on how much they can learn. And so it is the kind of lever that we have as teachers that can really see a difference in student outcomes. And if teachers are feeling that quite quickly when they're using more participation tactics, it's a real confidence boost to keep at it, and they can actually see the effects quite quickly.
I've got a question for Caitlin, actually. Just on that, this is your first go at using some of the Teachwell strategies. And I just wondered how you're feeling in that moment of trying these things for the first time.
So it's the first time filming myself, to be honest. So it was quite daunting to start with. But it's one of those, I feel like as a teacher, when you start this, you're like, yeah, I'm alive as a teacher. I'm doing good things. You know, I was calling the non-volunteers. I remember when they said that at the masterclass, I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing that. And asking kids to participate and do things. It's one of those things that you're like, yeah, I'm doing that. That's sweet. And so you watch it back and you're like, wow, they really weren't participating as much as I would have hoped. And you don't really notice until you watch it back or you do a self-reflection on a lesson specifically. And I was like, wow, I've maybe got 10 kids that are actually doing it, because in the moment you're just hoping for anything.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So you raise your own sort of expectations around how many students you'd expect to see. Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you.
So full participation there is different to some participation, and ideally you get full participation more often. So that's a great reflection. We'll watch a little bit more. This is still the pre sort of sample before the follow-up and the following masterclass, which might change a little bit, but let's watch another segment.
Okay. Equals the same thing. What does that equal? So 30. Centimeters squared, important when you're doing any kind of area of a shape, okay? What is my formula for area? Length times height.
So Caitlin, what are your reflections watching that back again?
It's so interesting. I'm watching these videos back and sitting where I am now and just going, wow, how did I accept that as my standard?
What are the things you're noticing that you would do differently now? So just so people can see the things that you're seeing.
Yeah, of course. Hopefully now more than 2 people are actually replying. So my hand cue that I was doing is more of an indication for my class to all speak at the same time, almost choral response back. And that obviously didn't happen very well. There was only 1 or 2. So at the moment now in my classroom, I'm getting 95% of my kids choral rehearsing it back. And one of the other pieces of feedback that I got when I went through the coaching process was that I mentioned, this is a really important thing. We need to remember this, but I didn't actually get my kids to say it or do anything with that piece of information to actually think to themselves, okay, this is important. And that's definitely something that now I'm like, this is important. What was important? And getting them to say it back to me is something that I'm doing in common practice now.
This is actually a question for Katie. So I was wondering if you could explain to us how participation helps with memory. So I imagine there's going to be a lot of secondary teachers listening to this who are going to find it hard to imagine getting 25, 13-year-olds to do a choral response and thinking, how do I justify this? Is it just a token response? How does it actually help with memory? That's our number one goal as teachers, is basically help students remember things. So what's the justification for it?
Yeah, I think that's right. Number one is we want kids to be able to remember this critical content. And our biggest challenge or our biggest enemy as teachers is kids forgetting. And so we're always trying to get them to find ways to remember. And there is actually a real benefit in students saying something out loud. So what we know is that we give them the benefit of the production effect, which is a slight memory advantage when we say something out loud over simply silently reading it. And yes, there might just be a slight memory advantage, but I'm going to take that over them just sitting there and listening to me do the cognitive work as the teacher. And the other thing that I want to do with students when I'm getting them to do something like a choral response or a pair share even, is I actually want them to have some rehearsal time. And that means that I'm trying to beef out the limitations of students' working memory. And that's really powerful.
Yeah. So I think critics would say, especially in secondary, that would lead to shallow understanding. And I would argue that the alternative is no understanding. But that initial stage is like, okay, knowledge is what we think with. We need to have something in our brains to think with. So how would you move students beyond a single response in secondary?
You definitely can start with something like a choral response, but I think you're exactly right. You need to move beyond that, particularly as students get older. What we know is the case is that once students know some knowledge or they have a clearer picture of the content that we're working with, then we want them to apply it. We want them to show us that they truly understand. And then we want them to be able to transfer that knowledge. Unfortunately, we do lots of activities in schools and classrooms where students go off to discover a lot of that themselves, and it's just really time inefficient. But if I can quickly and explicitly get my kids rehearsing, corresponding some key ideas, then we can get into the application and we can use some better tactics for that, such as whiteboards, where they're all going to demonstrate to me that they can actually apply that knowledge to a skill.
That's great. Thank you.
Let's jump into the last bit of the pre sort of videos if we can, and then it'll be interesting to see what you have been working on between this first part and the second group of recordings.
On your whiteboards, I want you to join those two shapes together. You can do it so that you've got a rectangle with a square coming off of it. You can make it look different. Either way, you're going to add them together, and I want you to add your measurements to it. Where my long side is. Doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be there. The shape that you've just made is a compound shape. It is combining two shapes together. What is the formula? 2 times 10, length times height. I want you to give me a thumbs up if you feel confident in doing one on your own completely. Give me a shaky hand if you're still a little unsure.
So Caitlin, thank you again for sharing your practice. I know it's quite a vulnerable thing to put it out there, especially with a pre and a post. What kinds of things are running through your mind when you're watching this section back?
It's interesting because the first time that I watched it and gave myself feedback last year, it was very, okay, I did okay with this and I did okay with this. And I was calling non-volunteers and I was getting them to use their whiteboards and I was doing those things that at Teach Well they told us to do. But looking at it now and after completing the masterclass series, I was watching that just then shaking my head like, oh my goodness, how did I not do so many other things? There was another opportunity there for them to choral respond to me and to get them all involved in doing that, using the whiteboards. I didn't even ask them to hold them up so I could look at them while they were doing their whiteboard activity. I didn't go and even look at all of them. I could see the front row. There was just a few things that I thought I was doing good at the time that I look back now and I'm like, wow, I'm doing it so much better now.
It's a journey.
Yeah, it is a journey. It's a journey for sure.
So when you're doing things like using mini whiteboards and thinking, I've ticked that box, I've done that, but then not looking at the response, do you think the thing that has been filled in between the first session and the last session is that knowledge base around the why?
Yes. Not a one-word answer, but yes. I think for me, it's always one of those things that teachers are told you should be doing non-volunteers, you should be doing whiteboards, you should be implementing all these tactics, but no one tells you why. They just say it's good. And the thing with the masterclass series is they explain the why. How does this help? Why is this important? What are kids actually getting out of it? And things like whiteboards and getting them to have that written practice, I always just thought in my brain, oh yeah, that's great. That's obviously kids are going to learn from this. but actually knowing that it's teaching them to practice, it's teaching them how to write it. They're showing it, they're checking in with their peers, and they're doing it again and again. And that routine, it's funny. If I were to do a similar lesson with my class now, it'd be so different.
So just thinking back to before you did all of this great learning and this coaching opportunity that the videos afforded, what kind of knowledge were you drawing upon when you put a lesson like this together, for example? And is it different to the knowledge that you have now about either lesson planning or those participation approaches?
I want to say it's different because, I went through Curtin University, got my uni degree for teaching. You always get sent on different PDs. Like as a teacher, you're constantly learning anyway. So I've not finished just yet, but you start with a very baseline. You're able to walk into the classroom and teach content to students. But I think the difference is doing, things where it's over time and you're getting feedback on your practice. You're able to adapt what you're doing to not just teach kids, but teach them efficiently and teach them to be lifelong learners as opposed to just, here's some content, remember it. And that's, I think, the difference, having that feedback and that coaching cycle and the new strategies not all dumped at once, but something that you can do. This is what you're focusing on this week, and this is what you're focusing on for the next 2 months, and this is what you're focusing for the 2 months after, and breaking it down makes it a lot easier to implement in my classroom.
So we're going to look at the second lot of videos now. And Caitlin, I just wondered if you could fill us in on what your goals were between the first video and the last video. So what kind of things were you trying to work on and improve?
Working on getting everyone to participate, and not just my 5 kids, but also getting them to actually fully engage, not just when I call them, but be interested in the whole lesson.
We can see some of those things in action.
All right, odd numbers are any numbers that end in
1, 3, 5, 7, 9.
even numbers are any numbers that end in
2, 4, 6, 8.
Awesome. With 12-hour notation, we
Write the digitals line with AM or PM notation.
and in 24-hour time, if it's PM, we
Add 12 to the hour and drop the PM notation.
And for people who are just listening in and not watching the video, the students aren't recalling this from long-term memory, although that would be very impressive, but they are all reading it off the slide together and in very good unison, as we can hear.
and if it's AM, we
Keep the numbers the same. Add a 0 before the single-digit number and drop the AM notation.
on your whiteboard, I want you to write me 7 PM as a 24-hour notation. 7 PM as a 24-hour notation. Once you've done hover,
We love hovering on this show.
7 PM as a 24-hour notation. All right, hover. All right, and chin it.
So looking at that sample there, what are the things that you're noticing this time from Katie or Caitlin? You could give some feedback here.
The first thing I notice is just the participation and the responses from the students is really high. So we can't see the students in this video, but you can certainly hear them. To your point, Nathaniel, there's a lot of voices there, and they are repeating the answers that they need in unison as well, which also tells me that there's tight cues and routines in this classroom. It's an orderly learning environment. It's not a few kids yelling out and then a few kids just not participating. What I noticed is the pace is up and the kids are busy with this content.
And just to be fair, I think one of the things to keep in mind with the first video is that the kids aren't in a routine necessarily either. So it's very hard to get those energy levels up because they're not actually used to necessarily people requiring that level of energy from them all the time. So I think it takes time to build those routines and things like that.
Yeah, I think that was one of the benefits of this happening in the new year is I was able to start this class going, this is how we're going to run our math session. This is how we're going to run our English session.
Yeah.
And so the kids knew the expectation of that and just waiting. So I will wait. And look, the first couple of weeks, we waited a while to get everyone doing the activity on their whiteboards. And I said, I will wait until every single body does it. And everybody does it without me needing to wait anymore.
It's the power of high expectations, isn't it? So you might think, oh, this class just can't do it, or I have trouble because they're so rowdy or they don't really listen. When you do actually break it down and you make the routines or the expectations concrete and easy to understand when you rehearse them, you can actually allow them to meet those expectations, and you don't have to lower them just because the class seems difficult. I think sometimes we forget that as the teacher, we are actually the weather or the climate in our classroom. We can make the climate really rowdy and really balmy, so to speak, or we can make it really clear and really sunny. And if we do a really good job of holding up those expectations, the students will rise to them, because we're a team at the end of the day. And that culture is the thing that you make it, rather than something you have to accept.
And you often hear like a noisy classroom is a thinking classroom, but I think there's a difference between this sort of structured noise and kind of chaotic, who knows what the students are actually thinking about and talking about, especially in secondary.
I think it's important to note this class isn't a perfect class. We're not in the perfect school. There are definitely behaviour in that class, but because even the students that have different behaviour complexities, they know that the routine is this, they're involved. And so you can't even say, oh, this class is a really great class, because don't get me wrong, it has its challenges, but they all know that the expectation is high for them. And it's not any lower just because they've got other things going on either. Like, it's still an expectation that you participate and you learn with the rest of us. So I think that's important to know.
And I think we do want classes to feel lively and we want them to feel alive. But as Beck, you're getting at as well, it doesn't mean we want it to be rowdy or we want it to be noisy or boisterous, for example. Ideally, it crackles into life when you set up a pair share and they start talking with their partner. It crackles into life when you prompt them to give a full sentence response or a choral response, for example. But then you can hear a pin drop when they start their focused work and they know exactly what's expected of them. I think it's a dynamic change in volume or change in focus, and it's completely purposeful. It's not just loud for the sake of being loud.
Yeah, and I think on that, Nathaniel, it's a really good point, but also it helps teachers to think about what are the strategies or ways that I can hold those high expectations. And that's what we hope to do as part of the masterclass series, is to give teachers more of the tools to be able to take that belief in having high expectations and put it into action. And if that means tweaking how they use whiteboards and having a tighter routine around hover it and chin it, those things make a difference over time. And I think that is high expectations in action, rather than just having a belief that I'm going to have high expectations for my students.
Yeah, exactly. It's making it concrete so that your students have something to aim for and that you've got something that you can actually focus on, rather than just willing it into it.
Yeah.
Well, let's watch the last few videos now and we'll pause as needed.
More, we're going to do 4 a.m. in 12-hour notation. 4 a.m. 12-hour notation. Once you're done, hover. And chin it. Awesome. I can see that almost every single person remembered to write AM. When it's 12-hour notation, we need to add AM or PM.
Would you, now looking at that video, also flash up the correct answer or put it on the whiteboard so they could visually check it as well as verbally check it? I'm just wondering if everyone was able to tick it or fix it in that sort of situation.
Yeah, I would now, definitely. I think writing on the whiteboard, I mean, I created those times that I wanted them to do on the spot, because that's how I change it up every day.
Yeah, and that was good and nice and responsive.
But yeah, so I would be writing it on the whiteboard, and it would also be a case of at 4 a.m. we need to write the AM. What do we need to write when it's in the morning? We write AM, and like getting that choral reversal, like that's something else that I would reflect on, is that's just another 5-second way of them to say it them again and have that in their brain again. So that's something else I would do now.
That feeds into my question actually kind of nicely, and it's partly for Katie and partly for you, Caitlin, and it's how much planning needs to go into generating these variety of choral responses or also responses, because I imagine there's different responses for different situations. So how much planning needs to go into it? And then for Caitlin, does that really increase your cognitive load when you're just starting to try out some of these strategies? Do you sort of hit overload fairly quickly when you are sort of trying to experiment with a couple of things?
I definitely started small. So I would start by, cool, today my focus is whiteboards. I'm going to get them using whiteboards amazingly. And then, so I wouldn't start all these strategies all at once. So for me, I did plan them in when I was starting. Yep, we're going to use whiteboard here, we're going to use whiteboard here, or we're going to get a choral response of this. And I did plan them in when I was making my daily reviews. But as I am going on now, and I've done 5 of the masterclass series, I'm a bit more confident in the strategies. There are certain times where I haven't necessarily planned it in and I go, this is a great opportunity for when it's going to do it as well. So I think it's something that when you're starting out and you're focusing one-on-one, you could plan it in. But as you get more confident in it, I could just chuck on a daily review and know where the best times to implement it is now because I've had so much practice in doing it. I don't know if that's the right approach.
No, that's exactly what we talk about with teachers is start small. Don't let perfect get in the way of getting started. So choose 1 or 2 things from today's session that you want to implement in your classroom. And the thing is, it's like with students, when we're not fluent and automatic, there is a cognitive overload that can happen to us as adults or teachers in the classroom. And so we're cognizant of that. So we just want to chunk it, don't we? We want to just have 1 or 2 ideas or strategies that are new to you as the teacher that you want to tweak or adjust. And then as you build fluency or automaticity with those tactics, you can then reduce your planning load by doing them a little bit on the fly or when the opportunities present themselves. And I think that's really difficult to do from the get-go. And so during the masterclass series sessions, we actually make sure we give time to teachers to do some of that planning and rehearsal. So they actually do some of that rehearsal and planning on the table with a piece of content, just to start that rehearsal process or thinking through what kind of tactics would I be able to do with this definition, for example.
That's
Cool.
great.
All right, last set.
Alrighty. Solve the unknown quantity. An unknown quantity is when a number in an equation is unknown and the answer is given. Everybody all together. And all together. An unknown quantity is when a number in an equation is unknown and the answer is given. If 94 plus 8 equals 102, what minus 8 equals 94? That sounded so energetic. If 94 plus 8 equals 102, what minus 8 equals 94?
What I love that you've done there is, if you're not watching the visual version, although this is a good reason to get out the YouTube or the Substack edition of the podcast, is that you've got it visually in front of you. So students are able to see what you're doing, and you're doing a good example of dual coding where what you're saying is matching what you're showing. You've also got some great annotation onto the actual slide. You can obviously use your whiteboard, which I can see is handy there. There's a bit more white space for you to use. But if you can write directly onto the screen, digitally or otherwise, this allows students to see the work in real time. The other opportunity is document cameras, so which some people have started to experiment with, where you can grab up whiteboards and put student work under the document camera and show what's happening, as well as written work with pen and paper as well. But I love that this example shows that you're getting participation and you're also showing visually what you're actually doing mentally, which is really important.
Yeah, and there's a gesture as well, which I think is something I want to try, because sometimes even just a countdown sometimes can slow things down, or our verbal cues can actually slow things down when a gesture can just be a very quick flick to the students. I love that.
And they all know what it means now.
Yeah, not just waving around. Okay.
Any other things that you wanted to draw our attention to there, Caitlin or Katie?
I just think the way Caitlin re-prompts them, which is like, nope, not good enough, let's go again. And just the manner in which she does that, it demonstrates that she probably does that a little bit with them to make sure it's like, nope, I need more from you. I know you can give me more. And I just think that's a really nice comparison to her earlier video where she probably let some of that go because that was the status quo. And so I think that is true high expectations in practice. And I just really like that she does get that full participation on some of this content.
This content was still quite new to my kids in the daily review. This was like the end of our daily review. So and now they would be able to read it and they would be able to have the answer. And this slide would then move earlier into the review and it'll be a bit quicker. But it's good to include that information that they didn't quite get yet to give them that extra practice of it. And there were a few kids that still didn't understand this when we were doing it. And I could tell because the second question, which we don't see in this clip, I asked them to do on their whiteboard independently. And that was one of the ways that I was checking who was getting it and who wasn't. And it's one of those things that keeps evolving as I keep learning new skills to use in my teaching.
And I'm a person with quite dry humor as well. It takes the kids a while to understand it, but I really appreciated you showing a bit of your personality there. That's exactly how I would handle that myself.
Yeah.
I'm interested if you have any further goals. If you're looking at these videos now, these are the ones that have been more refined or responded to feedback from the ongoing work that you're doing, Caitlin. Is there anything else that you notice that you want to keep tightening up? Because I think it's important that every teacher, no matter how experienced you are, you have the humility to look back at yourself and think, oh, I think I'd do this a little bit differently.
Yeah, I feel like there's never a point where you can sit back and go, yep, I've learned it all. Like that's not going to happen in teaching. I feel like I've gotten to a point that I've got all my kids fully participating, and that's really important for me. And in my daily reviews, that's working really well. But it's getting them to be more willing to participate in our just classroom discussions. I'm still finding that in our Talk for Writing, I'm getting the same 5 kids volunteering to assist with writing a story. So my goal is to now push this away from the daily review, because they're really good at that, and pushing it into the rest of the teaching, where I am just going to pop stick someone to tell me the next sentence in our story or to solve this maths problem, because I know that they're capable of that. So it's pushing it away from the daily review and the content that they know into the content that might be a little bit more challenging, but giving them that confidence to try it. That will be my goal.
I can feel your pain, because I think with the humanities, there's more risk involved for students. It's not always about the right answer. It's sometimes a right answer within a range of possible right answers.
Yeah.
And we need them to be doing that sort of cognitive work. So it becomes a bit harder. But I think you're going to be doing a really great job of building their confidence in responding in general, which hopefully will make them more inclined to respond when the risk is a little higher for them.
Yeah, and we've worked really hard to build a positive environment. And if a student gets the wrong answer, we're like, cool, what made you think that way? How could we fix it? Someone help us fix it. And it's not, oh, you're wrong, let's get the right answer. It's how can we grow so that we can all get the right answer together? And I think building that culture is something that we've done. And now we're able to use that culture to then experiment into the non-volunteers and those engagement strategies for the rest of our teaching, which is helpful.
We've really enjoyed having you both on the podcast. Beck, what's some of your takeaways?
I think my takeaway is going to be that I want to use gesture more. I'm using little verbal routines, which work quite well for now, but they do slow things down a little bit. And I'd like to get to the point where I use gesture. The other good test for gesture is that it really tests if everyone's looking at you. If they're not looking at you, then you've got another problem to sort out. So I think it'll be a good test for whether I actually have got 100% attention in my classes.
And I like pairing the gesture with that pause that I noticed Caitlin was using. So it's almost like you're willing them to fill in the gap because you've created a close sentence. And if you don't know what that is, it's CLOZE or ZE if you've got a different dialect of English. And a closed sentence is great because it's just basically an invitation to check for listening, and or depending on how sophisticated it is, a check for understanding as well. And I find if you pause and for that close and then you give the gesture at the same time, you magically seamlessly do it. And you don't have to say, I say, you say. You don't have to say, repeat after me. You can actually do it all non-verbally. And I agree, that's a really good one.
Great. Thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate your vulnerability, and the improvement is amazing. And I'm sure that your students are going to really see that progress over time, especially this year. They're coming up to a whole year with you, and I'm sure that they and their parents are thrilled. So thank you so much for coming on. And thank you, Katie, for sharing with us some of the practices and the ways that you're developing teachers through Teachwell. It sounds really comprehensive, and a really reflective process is underpinned by very deep professional knowledge. So thank you for sharing that with us today.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been great to share this with the other teachers, and hopefully everyone goes, oh, I need to sign up for Teachwell and learn how to refine my skills.
We're happy to have as many people as we can. No, thank you for having us. It's been really great for us to reflect on this journey, and I think what's truly important. And it's been really great to chat to you both and be part of your community.
We want to thank all of you as well, our listeners, and thank you for sharing this podcast with your colleagues or using it to structure your professional learning sessions. It is always great to hear positive feedback and thoughts and takeaways that you've also had. If you captured examples of your own practice the way that Caitlin has done in this episode, we do want to use it, and we'd love to make an episode out of it if you would be happy to share it with us. If you'd like to get in contact and share those examples, we'd love to hear from you.
Don't forget to rate and subscribe on Substack or YouTube, and we'll see you next time.